The first thing I wanted to talk about was because the summer solstice is a great pagan celebration, and because I think we self-consciously celebrate it with the sense that we are participating in something which goes slightly against the grain of the dominator culture in which we're embedded, and because that culture has made a paragon of reason, I thought it might be fun tonight to just talk a little bit about reason and intuition and the forms and the politics that attend each. So let me dig into this a little and think aloud. Reason, which is always held up as the path to true understanding, has two forms. They are called deduction and induction, and all forms of reason can be subsumed under these two types. Now, deduction, which is considered the stronger form of reason, is called reasoning from first principles. And it works like this. You start from an idea which cannot be proven. You accept it as given, and you reason outward from it. An example that is familiar to all of us would be Euclid's elements of plane geometry. You start with what appears to be an incontrovertible truth, or what we agree appears to be an incontrovertible truth. In the case of Euclid, propositions such as parallel lines never cross, never meet. Well, you can imagine a railroad in your head and run your mind along it to infinity, and then you've inspected the infinite railroad, and lo and behold, at no point did the rails cross. So you accept this as true. Then you can reason from it. Now, in the case of the Euclidean proposition that parallel lines don't meet, you test the truth of it by carrying out this imaginary inspection of the items involved and verifying that the statement appears true in all cases that you can imagine. But other branches of human knowledge also use deduction. Interestingly enough, theology. So theology reasons like in the following manner. God exists. This is perhaps not Christian theology, this is a generic theology. God exists, because Christian theology would seek to go further back and prove, in some cases, such as in scholasticism, that God exists. But let's just start with the given assumption that God exists, and then a second assumption, and God loves us. Given these two assumptions, then deduction goes to work and elaborates an explanation for why we are not with God, how we can get to God, and so forth and so on. So deduction is useful. Notice that my two examples have been drawn from, in the case of Euclid, mathematics, in the case of the second case from theology, a branch of philosophy. So deduction seems to have an important role in these abstract systems. But remember, I said it was one of two forms of reasoning that are ordinarily dealt with. Now, the second form of reasoning is, to my mind, more interesting. The second form of reasoning is induction, not deduction, induction. And induction, for those who believe in it, is thought to be, without doubt, a superior form of reasoning to deduction, because it leads to a control and a manipulation of real consequences in the world. Okay, what is induction and how it works and how does it work? Well, it works like this. When I hit the water with a shovel, it makes a splash. Every time I hit the water with the shovel, it makes a splash. Therefore, this is the leap, the therefore, shovels can be used to make water splash. Now, notice what is interesting about this in contrast to deduction is that there is no untested first principle. You don't state something and then reason from it. You make repetitious observations, and then those observations which are most repetitious you raise to the status of laws. Induction. And this was abhorrent to philosophical thinkers because it doesn't have this Aristotelian purity that deduction has. It doesn't have this mathematical elegance. It's messy. It's all down in the world, observing and comparing and repeating experimentally procedures. But nevertheless, out of inductive reasoning comes the structure of modern science. Okay. But now there's a funny thing about induction. It's making an unstated assumption about time. It is making the assumption that time is invariant. Because what it is saying is, if A precedes B in 1,000 cases, then it is likely that A will precede B in the 1,001st case. In other words, it's a probabilistic theory. It assumes that probabilistic laws give momentum to repetitious observation. Now the question is this so? And the answer is, well, it's so in some cases, but not in the most interesting cases. The most interesting cases, I believe, are the cases which lie in the realm of primary experience of being, the felt experience of being. And in that realm, the realm of love affairs, divorces, lawsuits, religions, political upheavals, and that sort of thing, induction is no good guide at all. One love affair does not explain another. One marriage does not illuminate another. One revolution really does not shed light on another. There may be generalizations, but when you live through these things, what you take from them is the uniqueness of the experience. The first principles that are reasoned from in deduction, whether in the realm of a deductive mathematical system like Euclid or a rational theology, these things are seen to rest on foundations of sand because of this problem of the axiom. In mathematics, the axiom appears fairly secure because it's self-evident, such as parallel lines never meet. It rests on its self-evidence to make its appeal to reason. You see, you can see that it is true, though no one has ever figured out how to prove this. You can see that it is true. But when you move from the realm of axioms to the realm of theological first principles, the appeal then is not at all to the obviousness of it, but to the desirability of it, that God exists, that God loves us. We hope these things are true, but they are certainly not self-evident in the scheme of things from the point of view of most of us. So what this shows then, I think, is that in the matter of deeper things, deductive reasoning rests only on the appeal that hope can lend to its case. Okay, so for me, this is a critique of deduction. Now, what about induction? I referred to the fact that its premises rest on this notion of temporal invariance, which seems to be true only for the grossest of phenomena. Science has made great hay in that dimension by creating laws which are essentially predictive laws of cyclical phenomena that define for us what part of reality goes around and comes around. In other words, we can predict simple phenomena involving the mechanical orbits in gravitational fields. We can make simple predictions about the end results of certain chemical processes, certain nuclear processes, so forth and so on. But when you lay it against the background of nature and experience, it begins to look like pretty thin soup. It's no basis for claiming epistemic preeminence. And this is the point that I want to make. Science claims epistemic preeminence. That means that science doesn't say, we are an ideology like Buddhism and Taoism and the Tarot. They say, we are a metasystem. We shall judge all other systems in our scales. Well, this is politics, but not good philosophy, because there is no basis for this claim to epistemic preeminence. So, this somewhat egghead rave is supposed to pass for a pagan polemic on the summer solstice, because it's an attack on the foundations of reason itself. And as you know, when reason goes, barbarism and madness cannot be far behind. And as a self-declared philosophical anarchist, as in fact the founding member of the Henri Poincaré Anarchist International, our motto is chaos is order. I believe that it's entirely appropriate to carry out an attack on reason. Okay, so then what are we left with? Well, what we're left with is intuition. Intuition. And what is it and how does it work? Well, it's a feeling into things that comes to answers and leaves no trail. That's the thing. It leaves no trail. So you have it, but you haven't the argument for it. And so its power must reside in its truthfulness. So the power of intuition lies in its ability to express truth in contravention to the forward flow of logic and casuistry. Well, is it always to be this? You know how the Tao is presented as this Eastern concept that you can barely wrap your mind around and that hovers at the edge of intelligibility. Well, really, in these so-called obscure Oriental philosophical stances always turn out to have a corollary in Western thinking. And the corollary to the Tao, to Taoism, is intuitionalism, is, an ability to sense the constraints and opportunities in the moment and act through it. Intuition. And intuition is always presented in the dominator society as 1 vague, 2 feminine, 3 unreliable. But this is simply because of this bias toward deductive and inductive systems whose falsity I have just demonstrated to you. In fact, in the felt domain of experience called living, Intuition is how most of us, even the most self-defined as non-intuitional, are operating. Intuition is a kind of field processing of both the foreground and the background of experience. It's a gestalt understanding that is subliminal and that leads the whole organism through an invisible set of creodes towards the maximizing of some kind of a goal. Okay, end of Act 1.